Aloha. Welcome to the Maui Pono Network interviews that we're doing for the 2024 elections. We'll be doing a lot of these interviews. We're open to all those who are running so that you can become an informed voter when you go to the polls. With me today is Jackie Keefe. She is running for State Senate District 6, and she's running as a Green Party candidate. Welcome, Jackie. Nice to have you here. And with me also is Bruce Douglas and Ann McCaffrey, who's also going to be serving with the interviews, as well as myself, Paul Deloria. Jackie, hello.
So District 6, 2 years ago, was redistricted. And so it's a little different than people recognize it being. And so it's going to be West Maui, South Maui, Waikapu, and Ma'alaya. So it's basically that whole hugging the shoulder of the west side of Maui.
Great. And, again, this covers such an important area, especially now what's happened in Lahaina. Could you tell me about your qualifications, and what you've done for the community or your job that makes you qualify to run for this important office?
Absolutely. So typically my background has been in restaurants, so hospitality management. I was the GM at Macadang Dang for the past 2 years, but we didn't reopen after the fire. And, I really learned community mindedness from Joey. And after the fire and, in those couple of days where we were stuck on the west side trying to figure out what can we do, where can we go, and so I was kind of going between the hubs and just oh, like, what does this hub have that this hub needs, and so borrowed a cooler from Napili Noho to bring to Honokawa, and like just little things like that. And after a day or two, I went to the to Napili Plaza where all the firemen were standing up the hub there, and I was like, I want to talk to whoever's in charge. And so they said, okay, well, that's going to be Chief Amos. And so they showed me who he was. I'd never met him before, but he was the battalion chief on the 2018 Hurricane Lane fire. Um, but he was retired, and so he was there volunteering his time as well. And I said it, I want to help. I don't know in what capacity. I'll be community liaison. I'll be whatever. Just let me help. And so he kind of was like, okay. And so he let me tag along. And then I got a little bit of training from his right hand that was about to have to leave, as to just how to be assistant to him. Because, I'm sure you remember in those first couple days, it was, I mean, more than just the first couple days, but our brains just weren't firing fully, right? And so it was making sure that everything that he was doing was being written down so that we could, everything that was being said, everything was being written down so that we could go back to it and, okay, what was that thing that we talked about? What did I just say? Because it was just running all day every day. And so that was how I got involved in West Maui Community Aid, which was kind of stood up through a bunch of the Native Hawaiian community leaders. So, Auntie Maka and Uncle Archie and Uncle Keamoku and Kaliko. And so after West Valley Community Aid, everyone started having their next kuleana. And so Kaliko pulled me to be her scribe. And so I was working closely with her. And so I was, attending the meetings with the mayor's advisory committee and taking notes for her. And through that work, I really started to learn all of the different processes and just, the bureaucratic red tape that everyone was and still is really struggling with. And so I made it a point to really understand and just figure out how I could help people. And so whether that was, helping someone on an individual basis where I could have, one of these connections that I had made with some of our state, county, federal partners, help them directly. Hey, here's their FEMA number. Please look into this case. And it just kind of spiraled from there. And so, I'm the engagement, education, communication person that just became an obsession of mine, especially after the fire, just with our communication blackout. And it's just, there was so much noise, and there still is so much noise, whether that be misinformation or disinformation or just misunderstandings, and just there's so much information just flying around all the time. And so being able to vet information and get the information that people need to them is
Okay,
really
so
just
what I hear is that you really got immersed with this Lahaina tragedy that
Mhm.
our community faced, and that
Oh,
you really became a kind of a cog in the wheel for
mhm.
communication throughout the community.
Mhm.
And that's certainly, with that, I can see that you started to see that there were some dysfunctions and things that needed to be improved. So is that was there anything prior to that, to the Lahaina fire, where you were engaged in some way within the community, or working with legislation or some type of the issues that our community faced prior to the fire also?
No, I really wasn't. I being in restaurants, especially in restaurant management, I think everybody in our community understands bandwidth wise. It just that opportunity wasn't there for me. And when I was doing this volunteering work, and then that turned into a community outreach job where, I was working technically as a Red Cross employee, but I was reporting to Maui County Communications, and there was a small team of us just trying to keep them in the loop about what is happening on
Sure.
the west side.
Okay,
And yeah,
I understand. So Anne, why don't I give you the floor for the next question?
Okay, so there was this kind of major milestone, well, considered by many and also met with resistance, that the recent bill, the Senate Bill 2919, signed into law by Governor Green recently, that uh, authorizes the county governments to regulate and potentially ban short-term rentals within their jurisdiction. And then shortly after that, Mayor Bisson proposed a bill. I'm not sure which one number it is, but to repeal that these decade-old short-term rentals and force them to convert to long-term rentals. I'm referring to the Manitoya decision, which affects something like 7,000 of these. And so, how do you feel that that's going to work out and provide housing for
I
the
think
Lahaina people? Because there's two different dates of that the bill will be active, like 2025, and then the other one for the rest of Maui is 2026. For first for West Maui, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then a year later, 2026.
Yeah, I think it's an important step that, the state gave the county home rule, which is something that they've been asking for. And it's really the county stepping up and showing, it is important that we house our people, right? Because as this will affect people who work in the vacation rental industry, and I know people who own cleaning businesses, and it's definitely going to affect people. But we also, I actually moved here in 2016, and so I moved here the year after that Minatoya list decision was codified into law. So I have watched just the rising of those short-term rentals because they don't need a permit because of the decision. But you have community areas like Napili Ridge. When I first moved here, that was almost all local housing, and now that's almost all vacation rentals. The same thing happened at the Spinnaker, and like places where I have friends that live, that every time a lease was up, it was getting harder and harder to find housing, and so I do think that it's an important step that they took, because I don't know how else we're gonna keep people here. We can't build at the rate that they want to build. And even if we could, there's the water issue, right? So it's all these things are so nuanced, but they require conversation. And that's why I say, like, I'm the person obsessed with communication, because if we're not having these conversations, then people aren't understanding the issues.
Right. Do you think that those will be rated at affordable rates of rentals? That's one thing I'm not certain of. And
I
then
mean, I know,
a lot of these are like studios or one bedroom, possibly not um,
mhm.
not even much different than a hotel, but and maybe not appropriate for some families, but I guess some
Right.
are. But
Yeah, I mean, I know originally they were built as workforce housing, right, for our people, and just over time it's gotten away from that. And part of that is homeowner decisions, right? When people sell, if you decide to sell to the highest bidder, that doesn't mean that you're selling to a local family. And so, again, these issues being so nuanced. But I know of a lot of families who, are finally starting to get housing, and all they wanted was something on the west side. And people that are disconnected from speaking directly to some of these people that are still stuck in the hotels. They say, oh, people don't want that, it's too small, yada yada, it's not a home, it's a condo. But these people are just thrilled to be able to stay on the west side. And so I do think that affordable housing, um, it- it's complicated, right? Because I think that there's definitely conversations about rent control and the need for some sort of, how can our government address this? But there's also, if you're treating a property as a business, which is what you're doing when you have a short-term rental, right? Um, you're subject to business loss. So if the market changes, then yeah, your housing that you bought is going to lose value, right? But if you listen to the testimony of people who are against the state bill going through, it was a lot of, I'm not going to be able to afford my property in Hawaii, but not, I can't find a place to live in Hawaii. And I think we have seen such an out migration from the state. And I think that whatever they can try, I heard a lot of that from people I spoke to from the early days of fishing for housing, was like, at this point they just need to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. And so I think people are just happy that they're trying something.
right. So another question.
Bruce, well, let Bruce go,
I
Ann,
just wanted to
and,
expand
oh,
on it. Okay, we'll go back.
okay.
You can expand it. Go ahead if you
Go
got
ahead.
something to
I was
expand on
just
it.
going to ask, you said you just got involved once the Lahaina fire, tragedy
Mm-hmm.
of the Lahaina fire. What was your experience since that time with civic engagement at the state legislature level?
So I'm not sure if you're aware, but my friends and I we were the ones that were trying to hold those community discussions surrounding SB 3381, because we had on pretty good authority that that was our one chance at that bill. And so we wanted the community to engage and see if we could make it into something that the community felt good about, because we didn't want to miss that chance. And we know there was a lot of issues around it. And having contacts in county, I've reached out to people in county and I said, hey, like, what's your opinion on this? And they were like, we're against it, we think it's overreach. And I said, okay, great. Because they said, oh, well, it's going to erase 6 months, because at this point it was 6 months later, it's going to erase 6 months worth of work that we've done. And I said, okay, but tell us about that work. Like, can you share that stuff with us? Because county is pretty notorious for planning things, but the implementation sits on a shelf. So, we just wanted to explore all options. But not just that bill, our final engagement session we did was with Akaku. But, I went to the Capitol twice when I was trying to, whenever I was able to. I testified on as many bills as I could keep up with. But it's 50 testimonies feels like a failure, because there's just so much. And that's why I believe that we need officials, we need legislators, we need people who represent us to be communicators and to say, like, hey, there's this important stuff coming up. Let's get out the word. Let's make sure we're engaging. And because it was so helpful to have Lahaina Strong sending those emails out, but sometimes it was like, this needs to be in by tomorrow morning.
I
And
saw that too.
that's really hard. And that's why I think it's so important that our legislators are doing that. I don't think it should be on this small group of community members who have to do that. I think it takes all of us.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Jackie, yeah. Somewhere back in the 70s at a constitutional convention, we got rid of partisan politics in the county level. Blessed be. But we're still stuck with partisan politics on the state level. Tell me about your decision to run as a Green Party member and how you came to that and what that means to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that question, Bruce. Originally, I went to pull papers the day that I could. So I was there February 1st, and they said, oh, here's your list of parties that you can choose from. And I looked at it, and the Green Party wasn't on there. And so I was like, all right, I guess I'll pull as a Democrat. Like, I have to choose. And she's like, yeah, you do. And come to find out, you don't, but it's a lot more complicated if you want to run as a nonpartisan, and it's a lot more challenging. But I've known for a long time that if I identify with a party, it's the Green Party. But I also understand, as you said, partisan politics in this country. And as I was pulling those papers, I reached out to the Green Party and I said, "Hey, how can I help you get on the ballot?" Because they were petitioning to get on the ballot, and so a couple weeks later, it was official that the Green Party was on the ballot. So I went back and I pulled papers as a Green because I don't. This district is not unique in its low turnout. We do have some of the lowest turnout in the state, but we average about 40%, and it should be higher, probably around 50 or so this year automatically because it's a presidential. But people are so unhappy with the decisions that we have, and people are so tired of choosing from the lesser of two evils that I just feel that the more options we have, the better off we are for it. And that's what I love about the Green Party is one of their pillars is democracy, right? The Green Party has been pushing for ranked choice voting for over a decade, and eliminating primaries, or open primaries. I'm originally from Massachusetts, and I didn't know that I had to register as a party to be able to vote in a primary out here because we had open primaries. And so, Hawaii was my first experience with that. And that bummed me out. I didn't like that I had to register as a Democrat just to be able to vote for Bernie in the primary, which I ultimately didn't do soon enough. So I wasn't able to do it anyway. Like, I just think that voting should be easy. We should try to engage people, and people are so over the two-party system. And I've spoken with a lot of people that are like, I don't care what party you are, I'll vote for you. You're excited and you're something new. And I think we need to do our best to give people more options so that they want to engage, because that's how our democracy will best represent us.
Thank you. And on that same vein, Hawaii is one of the most Democrat states in the union. We have an unelected Democrat leadership that basically runs the show in Hawaii. And Republicans, Green parties, everybody else is a tiny minority. And that puts anyone who's not in the primary party at a disadvantage to have any voice and power. If you make it to the state, how are you going to deal with that issue of the partisan politics?
Yeah, I mean, for one, I'm very much, as I've said, I'm a collaborative minded person. So I think that there's a lot of people who I know that there are a lot of people who are Democrats only because they were told, because I was told too, if you don't run as a Democrat, you're never going to win. I've heard multiple people that not directly to me, but I've been advised by multiple people that if we had someone win as a strong Green Party candidate, they would actually be willing to change parties. But nobody wants to be the first. But I believe in working across, I hate the saying across the aisle, right? Because that is part of the duopoly. It's part of the, it's just Democrat and Republican. But I believe in working with other people who share the same values. And I think that there is a lot of crossover between the parties on things, but it just, as you've said, it comes down a lot of the time to power more than anything. And so I think if we can put the people first versus power, the more people that we can elect that just want to be public servants, like that's what I keep saying. I'm not a politician, I'm a public servant, and we need more public servants in office.
Thank you for that. I'll pass it to Paul.
Okay, Jackie, you know, we're kind of a mixed bag here in our county in that we have a lot of legislative control by the state. Now, that includes things like our resources, our especially our school system. And if you look at the level of, I guess you could say, functioning or dysfunctioning of our school system, what would you do as a legislator to improve this educational system that we have right now?
So I think a lot of it comes down to collaboration because we have so many people that are in office that their priority is schools. But if you're, as a legislator, making decisions about schools without consulting the schools, and I think this goes on a county level too, just kind of generally in the way that the legislature works, if you're making decisions that you think are best, but those don't align with the people who are doing those jobs every day and have to implement that policy, then ultimately it's going to fail. And I think we see that with, the lack of evacuation routes, especially at the schools up Lahaina Luna. These people who work at the schools, they know that things aren't being done right, but their voice doesn't matter. And I don't believe that's true. I think their voice matters very much. And so I think there needs to be a lot more, I say all the time, we need to include subject matter experts. And when it comes to schools, that's the teachers, that's the administrators, that's the people who work on the properties and have to do these jobs every day. And these jobs that they're not paid enough for, and they are, constantly burnt out. I understand burnout as someone who works in restaurants. And I just think that it's very important to talk to those people about these decisions and work on policies together.
So thank you for that. And certainly there's a lot of different things in terms of legislation, especially around our educational system. Are you saying also that you're leaning more towards home rule, where we would have our school districts be based on the county instead of the state level? I think we're the only state right now that does that.
Yeah, I'm not really sure in terms of home rule versus, because it is so different across the state. But it's not so much that I believe home rule or not. It's just that I believe that the counties and the state need to be working together as opposed to one making the decisions. Like I believe for a lot of things, if you take funding, for example, and the legislator fights for funding for something that the county is not interested in doing or using the money for that, then you wasted political will and you're not likely to get money like that again in the future because you fought for something that wasn't even wanted in the first place. And so, if you're showing that you're working collaboratively because you understand what the community is looking for, I think that's a very different situation than if the state is just making the decision.
Got it. Okay, Anne, you're next.
Hi, Jackie. Yeah. And it was said, thank you for coming and running. So I wanted to ask you about water rights in West Maui. I know that there is some private ownership of water there, and there's been the Hawaiian natives the Native Hawaiians, have been deprived of water for farms. And then there was an issue when that fire, that there wasn't water available. And how do you feel about that? And is there a shortage of water in Lahaina, in West Maui, I should say?
Well, unfortunately, just like I've said many times, it's a nuanced issue, right? I will say first and foremost that everyone will tell you the private entities don't own the water, they own the control of the water. So the county has, in West Maui, the county has access to less than 25% of the water because more than 75% is controlled by private entities. So that is a big reason that the fire happened, because the land is dead and from all the diversions and colonization and, you know, it's all that. But in terms of, I have been up into Kauaula Valley and seen when the water is flowing, but I was also on alert when it wasn't flowing, and you know, turns out it was the, you know, a heavy rain had pushed some sediment into there, but it's because of the irrigation, right? If the streams aren't flowing their natural rate or their natural flow, it's things like that are going to happen. It's just like a fake system, so issues are going to arise. I think that to say that we don't have enough water is both true and false, because Pu'ukukui is one of the wettest spots on earth, but the way that the water is moved um, does make it so that we don't have enough water. The the water the day of the fire, you know, it was a pressure thing, right? Like it's there was no pressure in the lines. But there are people who have been fighting for decades for the public trust to be restored. And you know, I think that it was a major failure this session, that those important water bills died. Um, and I think that that's something that I definitely would prioritize, because it's so important to the restoration of our land and just people's livelihoods. I mean, you just on a crappy day, the water just stops flowing to these like lo'i patches, and we can't have that, you know. And so um yes and no, which, you know, I hate to give that answer, but it's, if we do think, if we fix things, then yeah, we have enough water, but we need to fix things.
So why did you feel that those bills didn't pass? Was it the crafting of the bill, craft of the bill, or was it just the resistance to uh, the people controlling the water?
I think that it was a combination. I think there's definitely, you know, there's definitely political control over who's in charge of implementing these things. And so to see the bill that attempted to split that and make it, you know, non-political or less political, failing was probably, you know, political forces, which is the answer you sometimes get when you try to ask, you know, what happened to a bill. Um, but I do think it was also not so much crafting, but like when one bill died, they tried to insert some of that language into the Red Hill bill, and then that's what killed the Red Hill bill. So, you know, I think if the Red Hill bill hadn't had that stuff added, it might have actually passed. That's what a lot of people I've spoken to have said. But I, you never know with the ledge, right? I think more transparency is very important over there.
Right. Because we had that amendment for East Maui Water Authority to be at the county level. And I thought they would maybe apply the same thing measure in Lahaina and West Maui, I mean.
Yeah, and that's the thing, they've all been fighting, right? It's not just West Maui or East Maui, it's
Right.
everyone's been fighting for their water. And if you fix one part of the system but you don't fix the rest, some of the people are going to lose their water because, you know, they get diversions from a place they shouldn't. And so it's very interconnected, and it needs to be addressed as such.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jackie, going, being a state legislature, most of what you do is vote on bills, write bills and introduce them and press for funding for your pet projects in your district. What will be your priorities when you get to the state legislature?
Well, I'm still working to learn what matters most to the community. I personally, I think it's long past time for us to prioritize a circular economy. Working in hospitality, you really see the food waste and you see the compostable plastic waste. And, I've spoken with Gretchen, who, West Maui Green Cycle is her. And, I asked her, can your facility handle these plastic, these biodegradable cups? And she said, yes, except there's too many of them. There's not, there's not a way for us to compost all those. And, and I've been at Lahaina Luna recently, and they have like a couple recycling bins like in the cafeteria, but not all over campus. And they're not participating in the composting program anymore. And so for me, that's something that's really important, because I know there are a lot of people in the community that feel the same way. But I know that affordable housing and infrastructure, and therefore public safety, and so there are a lot of issues that are important to this district, and I would like to know what they feel is number one. And that's especially true in Kihei. I mean, I have a wide base of people that I speak with in Lahaina, but I'm pretty new to Kihei. I have some friends over there, and obviously I have a lot of friends that have been displaced over there, but I need to learn more about how Kihei feels as well, because they are a large part of it, and they have, similar but different issues than what we have. I know traffic is big everywhere. I know flooding is big everywhere because we built on wetlands. So we need to, figure out how to address those problems. But yeah, I would like to know more of what the community prioritizes, because I know what's important to me, but I want to make sure that I'm representing what's important to the community.
Thank you.
We'll do
What would
one.
be,
Go ahead, Bruce.
what would be your three, if you're going to champion three bills going into the state, what three bills would you champion, write, help press through? What would be your three primary things that you feel?
I think the first one would have to be water. You have to make sure that we have a way to, there was a bill that I don't even remember if it got a hearing at this point. 'Cause this session is a blur, but that was trying to take that ownership back and put it into the public trust, and allocating funds to make sure that the attorney general did enforce that. And so I think some sort of a water bill needs to be done. I don't like to see them too big, because I I just always worry, because that tends to be when they die. So whether it be one or multiple that you want to lobby together. So water is definitely a priority. Um, I know that for me, I have a lot of friends who have had home births, and I really, I hate to see how much it stresses the midwife community, that we have this, this way of making their lifestyle so challenging. And and it used to be that you attended births. That's how you learned how to be a doula, how you learned how to be a birth coach, because you just attended a whole lot of births. But how we've shifted into this system of OBGYN. But I don't like to see our state kind of criminalizing a very, like, what I have known friends to find a very comforting way of having a child. So I would like to figure out how to address that issue as well. And it's hard to it's hard to choose one. I'm happy that the counties have home rule on STRs now. but I think healthcare is just such a huge issue for us, where we've had it's been a very long time that we're supposed to get a hospital over here, and the one hospital we have on Maui has bumper stickers that say "I survived Maui Memorial," and that is no good. And I know that just across the state, I've struggled with it myself. When you try to get mental health care, the wait and the canceling of appointments, and when, like, I fully support when there are these strikes because they are standing up for what their patients need, but then my appointments get canceled month after month, and it just it's this cycle because we don't pay enough, and the benefits are a mess. I would love to see healthcare for all, because I've worked for small businesses. Restaurants have very small operations, margins of operation, and they pay over $500 per employee per month for healthcare, and that's on the lower end. That's not if we're talking management and their families and all that. And so to have healthcare where we have this, you pay so much, your employer pays so much, and then you still have a deductible and you still have a copay and you still are just fighting debt. So I guess healthcare for all, if you're going to put me on the spot, I wasn't prepared for it, but I think that's really important. And I think it's going to take way too long if we expect it on a federal level.
Hey, thank you for that. And yeah, part of the idea is to put you on the spot and see
Yeah.
where you go with it.
Yeah.
So Jackie, I got one final question, and then we'll just see if Ann and Bruce have any additional questions. But mine has to do with how long it's taken for permits for building in Lahaina. Now, you've been involved in the communication dynamics.
Mhm.
Now, when I compare that to what happened after Aniki in Kauai, they were building structures 1 month after the incident. But yet here we are all these months later, and again, it's limited in terms of what we're actually seeing. There has been some recent groundbreakings, but what why are the delays? What have you seen in terms of what went on from your perspective?
Well, I'll say, unfortunately, an answer to a lot of the issues with what happens with county is staffing. So, um, a lot of the time, if you ask a question, why something in county, the answer is we don't have the staff for it. There's a lot of open county jobs. That's, it's hard because they don't necessarily pay enough to be able to live here, but then you also, you have to work out of Wailuku. And so we should be making some jobs that can be made virtual. We should be making virtual. And, I've spoken with a woman from Lanai, and she says, the county jobs are coveted jobs. We would love them here, and you guys have these open positions. So, hey, let's do that, so staffing is definitely part of it. But I will say, so I mentioned to you pre-recording, I'm in this program called Partners for Democracy, and at our first weekend, it was the graduation of the previous cohort, and they had the mayor of Honolulu speaking. He gave the keynote, and he talked about how they have used AI to eliminate their permitting line. And so I think that this is, again, where we come to collaboration and communication, right? If there's one county that's doing something right, then we should probably talk to them and find out, why were you able to do this and we weren't, and how can we do that? Because the fact that they were able to eliminate those waits, that's something that is a huge issue here. Prior to the fire, it's you wait 3 years for permits, and there are people who didn't want to go through the expedited permitting because they had permits that they had already applied for and been waiting on prior to the fire. And if they got their, the expedited permit, that's like for your previous, if it was built within 5 years or, whatever. So there's all these stipulations. And so, yeah, I think figuring out how to use AI in a way that doesn't take people's jobs away, but eliminates redundancies is that's what it's for, right? Like that's what we should be using it for. And so I think, we need to make sure that we're looking to each other to figure, we have this this very unique experience living in these islands. And so, you know, if one county is doing something really well and the other, another is doing the opposite of that in the same department, then hey, we should be looking to each other and figuring out how can we do this better, you know? And so it's hard because it's a county question, right? And I'm going for state, but I just think encouraging that collaboration is very important.
Great. Thank you, Jackie, for that. And do you have any final questions at all?
I was just gonna say, how can our state diversify the economy beyond tourism? So we're so dependent on tourism.
Yeah, so
Examples that we could, you could give
yeah,
us.
that's one of the reasons that I get excited about the idea of a circular economy, right? Because if you think about it, there are people building homes out of old tires and glass bottles, and you know, and we have this recycling that we ship away, and we have you know, we have farmers that could be using that cardboard for mulch, and we have you know, we could have businesses that are, you know, making glasses out of previously used like wine bottles, and you know, and so there's all these really interesting things that people are doing. And I think, you know, we live in this kind of global society now, and to be able to look to each other and say like, wow, they're doing that really well. You know, we have plastics that, what are we going to do with them? Okay, maybe we should have a facility where we're like making something out of secondhand plastics, and you know, and so just figuring out how to use that.
We
I
used to
think,
have that here in Maui.
yeah,
They did that.
yeah,
They made
and
furniture out of plastic, and they made crushed glass to fill like parking lots, islands and that. And I don't know what happened to all that.
that's what I mean, right? You just sometimes we give up on things because they're not happening fast enough, or whatever the reason. But I think we live in that, we're in this moment where, you know, if you speak to people about the rebuild of Lahaina, you have you know, if you speak with community leaders, it's this hopeful thing, because we have this opportunity. That's the word everyone uses. We have this opportunity to fix Lahaina and you know, build it safely, and build it, you know, in a way that's not eroding our shorelines. I mean, Maui's shorelines are eroding 43% faster than the rest of the islands. Like, that's horrifying. And so, you know, if we need to make decisions to be able to sustain ourselves. You know, we need to be thinking in a 7 generations way versus this like Western consumerism lifestyle that we're living. We live on an island. We can't just keep bringing in plastic and just not knowing what to do with it. You know, I was very upset when I was on a waste to energy resolution, and there were all these experts that said, hey, like, this is dangerous, let's not do that. And you know, Senator Favela said, oh, well, we're never going to have zero waste. And it's like, well, not with that attitude. You know, you are in the position where you can push for these type of policy changes, and unless we have people in positions of power that are pushing for those kind of changes, it's never going to happen, even if
I hear that, Jackie, and that's why you're running for that very reason. Bruce, do you have any other final question before we end? You're on mute, buddy.
If someone was to ask you, what is your platform, and you give the elevator pitch for the here's what I stand for, what would that be?
So my stance is, first and foremost, communication, collaboration, education, and engagement. I want the community to be involved in decisions. I want to hear from them. I want people to not feel as though decisions are being made on Oahu without them, which is the resounding thing that you hear all the time. And so I just believe that it is time that we have a public servant representing us rather than a lifetime politician or a fundraiser. And we can do it together. Together we can make Maui and Hawaii better. But if we're not working together, we're never going to get anywhere.
Well, thank you for that, Jackie, and thank you for this interview and taking this time. And hopefully, as our community begins to learn more and more about the candidates, then they can make informed decisions, and that's what the Maui Pono Network stands for. So please stay tuned. We'll be having more interviews as we continue throughout. We'll be doing that all the way through June 6th, every Tuesday and Thursday. So look for us at Facebook Live and also on our website. Take care. Aloha.
Mahalo for having me.
Thank you,
Thanks so
Jackie.
much. Mahalo. Ahui ho.